Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I think one of the most commonly asked questions and searched things for houseplants is what plants can survive in little to no light. And while the answer is none can survive with no light, there are definitely some that can survive and not thrive, but that do decently well still in low light. And I have quite a bit of experience with this because I actually lived in the basement of someone's house for a couple years while I was in college. And I wanted to have a ton of plants, but I only had one room in that basement that received enough light to sustain any sort of plant in there. So I had to learn and find the plants that would still grow and still pop out new growth once a month at least, even though they were only getting an hour or so of good light during the day. So let me show you my favorite houseplants that can survive in lower light conditions. So one of my absolute favorite low light plants is actually the Burgundy rubber tree. I have a variegated one right here, but this one requires a bit more light in order to get that variegation. Otherwise, if you do want to keep it in low light, you can, but it just won't throw out that variegation as much. Whereas the Burgundy leaves, they are nearly black a lot of times, and they don't need a lot of light in order to grow and grow quickly as well. So I had a little Burgundy rubber tree about that big that I kept on my nightstand when I lived in that basement I was talking about, and in that room I hardly got any light. On my windowsill I got a little bit of light during the day, but other than that there was none in that room. And it still threw out a new leaf every, I would say month and a half maybe for the bigger leaves, but it still did decently well, and I didn't have any problems with it, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm looking for a new one, but just haven't quite found the one that I love yet. Basically all Monstera varieties can survive in lower light. I had a Adansonii that I kept on my nightstand in my current apartment, and it gets there's some medium light that hits that room, but it really is quite dark in comparison to this room, for instance. And it did totally fine. It was tucked away in a little corner, so even the light that did come in didn't quite hit it. So it was basically just getting the light that bounced off the walls, and it was still throwing out new leaves every week or so. It was growing insanely quick, and I didn't expect that from Monsteras. I knew people said that they did well in low light, but I didn't expect it to actually actively grow in that low of light conditions. The Monstera deliciosa as well does well in low light. I know the baby ones, so ones that aren't big, established and that sort of thing, you kind of want to keep in higher light conditions just so it can grow a bit quicker. But overall, they actually can tolerate lower light conditions, and you don't actually have to have them in a really bright room right up against a window or something. Another low light plant is actually Pothos, and basically all Pothos varieties can survive in lower light conditions. I have, for instance, this Marble Queen. I think it's a Marble Queen. Don't think it's a Snow Queen, and he is not in the brightest of places and hasn't been in the brightest of places. So you can see these leaves right here. They have a bit more green on them, whereas some other leaves are a bit more white and have more of that variegation. And if, as a general rule of thumb, for low light plants, if they have dark leaves, dark colored leaves like that Burgundy ficus that we were talking about, they can probably tolerate lower light than ones with bright leaves like these, or my neon philodendron that I have. Those are gonna want lighter conditions. So you can see with this one, where it has the darker leaves, it was in a bit of a darker spot, and now that it's in a bit of a brighter spot because I moved it, it's throwing out more variegation, more of the yellowish, whitish kind of variegation on the leaves. And that's the main difference between having it in a dark room versus a bright room. Another one on this list is very similar to Pothos, but it's actually Philodendron. And let me show you the ones that I have that just are doing well overall. So this little neon Philodendron is probably my best example. And I know I said just a second ago that if the leaves are lighter, it needs more light, and I stand by that. But Philodendron just do well basically wherever you put it. These are probably the ones that you can ignore the most, and they still do completely fine. But he, literally started up here and has grown like crazy. But this growth down here, let's take a step back. All this growth right here has been since I've put him in a lighter place. So if I can get you to see these tiny leaves right here in comparison to all the leaves underneath them, they are so small in comparison to like this one down here. And these leaves were actually produced by the plant when I was in that basement. So you can see like the low light, like it can still grow and can still do fine, but you won't get as big of leaves and you won't get as fast of growth. But they do totally fine in low light, and they will still survive and will still grow in those light conditions. Another plant favorite of mine that does really well in low light and that I've had in low light and has like thrown out a lot of new growth and it hasn't seemed to affect like the growth rate at all is I think it's called a rabbit foot Anta. I haven't had any experience with the other ones, like the red veined ones and the green veined ones, but these ones specifically I know for a fact do really well in low light and bright light. But I had one like this. This is a different plant completely, but I had one exactly like this in a very low lit room, and it gave me like 3 new leaves a week. It was insane. And it just did really, really well. And it actually shocked me because I hadn't seen anywhere that they would do particularly well in low light. But if you're looking for like a pretty Calathea maranta type plant, this one does amazing in low light. Once again though, if we're getting picky, this one does have some variegation on some of the leaves, like some of the, not like, you know, red variegation. But let me see if I can find one of the more variegated leaves. But like, if you can see that variegation right there, it has those variegated spots, but those variegations will be brought out by more light. So if you want one like that, you need to have it in a bit brighter of a spot. Otherwise, you can have a perfectly good, healthy plant growing really fast with just the regular variegation. The next low light plant, I don't actually have one to show, but it is just the ZZ plant. And that's a plant that you're gonna find on basically every single low light plant list. I had a Raven ZZ about a year ago, and granted it grew very slowly for me in the low light that I had it in, but it still did grow and there was no problems with it whatsoever. So I know for a fact that those do really well. And a lot of times people have them thriving in low light. I don't know if mine was just a one-off, that it wasn't growing very fast, but I know a lot of people have some that grow very quickly even though it's in basically no light. And the last plant on my list is actually just basically any Synapsis variety. So I have, for instance, like this Exotica down here that does very well no matter what lighting condition it's in. And then also I have this Trebii, I think it's called, that I got not too long ago, that I assume is going to be the exact same care as the Exotica. It hasn't been any different so far for me, but it's got quite dark leaves for plants, so I think it's going to do just fine in low light. But I'm pretty sure all Synapsis varieties basically tolerate low light about the same, and they do quite well in it actually. I haven't had any issues with like growth during low light versus bright light. There hasn't been like too much of a variety in that sense. So that's it, guys. If you guys could take any plant away from this list, I would hope that it would just be literally Philodendron and Pothos, because those two are my favorite from this list just because there's so many varieties. But I hope this was helpful for you, and I hope you can find some plants that fit your space perfectly. And thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. See you later.